Okay, can everybody go into Rhino and then just type in the word Grasshopper, and it should open up the program for you. So this is going to be getting a very basic overview of Grasshopper. I'm just going to go over mostly the user interface, and then I'll go over some very basic things like making points, making lines, making cubes, and then maybe at the end, if we have time or if you guys are feeling comfortable, we can maybe look over like some very basic lists. So I'll just like go over the interface first. So the first thing you would do is go into here and then go File and then open or New Document. Oops. And so you get a brand new canvas is what they call it. So laggy. And so all of your widgets and all of your tools in Grasshopper up here. You can go down here, drop down in the menu, and there will be all your commands here as well. So like there's the basic parameters, geometry, there's points, vectors, circles, stuff like that. There's primitives for numbers and letters. If you go to maths, there's your basic like addition, subtraction, stuff like that. There's your curves. These are the tools to analyze curves, like finding the endpoints of it and stuff like that. And then there's the primitives to make basic lines, curves, circles, stuff like that. You can also, if you're trying to find something and you don't know what it's called, you can double click on the canvas and you start typing in something. So if you're looking for a line, type in line, and there's all these widgets that are labeled line. You just click one of them and then it drops onto the canvas here. If you want to get rid of it, just click and delete. The way to move the pan around is the right click button, and then the middle click button gives you a bunch of options. Or should anyways, I don't know what's not in this one. That's fine.
It's also the same thing if you hit the space bar, it'll also pop up.
There, yeah. So sometimes like if you're typing things in, it doesn't really show up. Like I'm looking for a command called construct point, but if you type in point, sometimes it's funny, it doesn't show up. So if you start typing, you have to actually know the widget sometimes. Sorry?
It's the start of the word.
Yeah. So if you type in construct point, that's the first thing we're going to do. So type that in, and then you do your widget here. So I know I was going to. So there's different ways you can view these widgets. There's if you go display here, you can do draw icons. So this is what most of the tutorials online will show you, because it's like it applies to all languages, and that way they don't have to like translate for you. So if you look at scripts online, most of them will be widget form or will be icon form, and most tutorials do icon form as well. But that's something you have to kind of get used to, memorize. So for now, we'll do take the draw icons off, and then also put on draw full names, and then it gives you the details of everything in the widget better. So this is construct point, and then on the left side are your inputs, and the right side is your output. So the inputs are like values you put into this point. You give it an x coordinate, a y coordinate, z coordinate, and then it outputs a point for you. If you look on Rhino, this little green x, if you have your widget highlighted, it will be a little green x right in the middle of 0, 0 point. That's because the default numbers that are set for these points coordinates are 0. And you can individually change these numbers yourself. So if you want to say the x coordinate to be 5, you just type that in there and commit changes. And then your point moves over to coordinate 5, 0, 0. If you go to parameters and you click on this yellow icon called panel, you just click and drag it down into your canvas. This panel is what you use to look at what's being output by your widgets. So right now, it's from parameters up here, and then this yellow icon. You can also type in panel. So to connect a wire, you click and drag this point into this one, let go, and then it'll show you what's being output by this widget. So right now it's a point with the coordinates 5, 0, 0. And again, you can change the y coordinate individually.
Excuse me, Cody, where do you get the full name?
Display.
So we want to go to display and
Yeah.
draw in the third.
So let's change this number to 7.
It's calculated.
Yeah. So it turned to 70. So I guess the point's up here now. So that's one way you can input numbers for it. The better way is to use number sliders. So you just double click, or actually number slider is up here. If you click and drag it down, at default the number slider goes from 0 to 1 with 3 decimal places. So you take this and you plug it into your x coordinate. You can adjust. You can adjust it. You can see like in Rhino is moving a little bit. If you want a larger range, so you double click here, and then you change the minimum maximum value. Right now it's the minimum value is 1 and the minimum maximum is 2. So if you slide this over, it goes only between 1 and 2. But if you double click and you change this number to say 100,
Yeah, so
check
there's
and
a
okay,
range between- there's 100.
and then you've got that range between 1 and 100
And
now.
then so you can change the.
Let's just wait till the name's done.
Just set your windows up so they're side by side so you can see what's happening in Rhino real time.
So no matter how big the TV is, it still seems too small.
What's that?
It still seems too small.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's always nice to have 2 screens when you're doing this, like one full screen of Rhino, one full screen of
So
Grasshopper.
numbers are just the value.
Yeah, all it outputs is a number. So if you like the panels, it'll tell you what's coming out of it. It's just the number 1 coming out of this panel. There's nothing else other than a number coming out of it. Okay, so an easier way to do a number slider would be if you double click and you want to type in, if you want a number slider between 1 and 100, you just type in 1, 2 dots, two periods, and then you go 100, and it'll make you a slider that goes between 1 to 100. If you want it to be decimals, you can type in 1.0 dot dot 1 and then 100.0, and then you've got your 1 decimal place.
What if you just type in like 10?
You can type 10.
You can just type in 10 and it'll make its own range, but it'll give you the value of 10.
It always goes to like the maximum. So if you type in like 99, it'll go like 0 to 100. But I
50.
find the easiest way.
It doesn't always go to the maximum if you type in.
And then you can slide it around.
It doesn't always go to the maximum. Like it goes from like 1 to 10 and then 1 to 100 and then 1 to 1,000 or something like that. So if you type in 50, it'll go from 1 to 100, but it'll give you that 50 value. Yeah. So let's say, to keep things simple for now, let's use this number slider as the coordinate points for all 3 coordinate points. So take this number slider and we'll drag it into the 3 coordinate systems for the point. So once this is put in, you can see output is the point at there's a point at coordinates 1, 1, 1. If you slide this over to a different number, if it's say 8, then there's going to be a point at 8, 8, 8. Because they're all related to this same number slider. You could copy and paste this and make another one. So you can just type in Command C, Command V, or I think you can also, is it Alt on Mac? Yeah, if you click and then hold Alt,
On Mac is option.
option, yeah. It'll also make another widget for you. So say if you want the X and Y coordinates to be the same, but you want the Z one to be different, you can make a new number slider, plug that into the Z. If you already have this one plugged in, if you just put this one in, it'll take it over. Another way to do it is if you want to just disconnect this one, you click this widget here, and you hold down the command button, and you see that that red negative comes up, and that'll take it away. Another way you could do it is right click and then disconnect number slider, and it'll get rid of that. So there's a few different ways you can get rid of it. But in this case, you just slide this one in, it'll take it over, so it's only taking over that value, and then you can adjust this number slider individually, and you see the coordinate changes just the Z and nothing else.
So the fact that pulling a new wire into takes it over means that it can only take one set of data. There'll be other widgets that it'll take multiple sets of data, but in this case, Z can only be one number,
Yeah.
so it automatically subtracts the other wire out.
Alright, so again, you've got this basic point out in Rhino. Right now it's red because it's not being selected in Grasshopper, and you can't select in Rhino. It's just like a preview thing that's not actually in Rhino yet. I'll show you later how to bake it and to make it into an actual point. Yeah. Let's see. You can also make number sliders relate to each other. So if you want, say the x, say the y coordinates to be at least twice as much, and always be twice as much as the x coordinate, you can either go to maths and grab this multiplication widget, or you can just double click and type in multiplication. There's that first widget there. So this is a new widget that has an input value, 2 numbers, and it comes out with the result. So say if you always want it to be 2 times that value, just double click, get a 2. Put that 2 into the B, and then you put this one into the A, and you can see the result by making a panel. So 8 times 2, 16. If you adjust this number, it'll adjust that number as well. If you want to keep this panel just to see what number you're getting, you can also use this panel to plug into the construct point. So if you have this here, you plug this into the y. So now what you have is an x value of 24 that you put here. You're multiplying it by 2 to get 48, and that's where the 48 comes from, the y coordinates, and then the 22 for the z. And then if you adjust this x, the y value will always be twice as much.
I have a comment about the panels.
What's that?
So the panels are really great to show you what output you're actually getting, because sometimes it gets very complicated. And they're also great for later on when you're doing more complex math like this, to show you what you're getting in list form. But the more panels you use, the slower it'll take to actually run. It'll slow down your script a lot. So I sometimes put in panels to check, but then I always disconnect it or just take it out, because it'll slow your script down more than it needs to, and it'll get kind of frustrating once you get very complicated or longer scripts. So
as you can see, it's already getting kind of messy. So what what I like to do is make a group. So you just select everything and just Command G, and it'll group everything everything together for you. So you know that all these widgets and all these things in here make a point for you. So this is your point. So if you want to label it, you can type in scribble, and then it says double click it and say
so
point.
you can adjust it.
And then
sometimes your group comes out like this weird bubble around.
oh yeah,
like,
you can change
you can
what
definitely
the group looks like. You might make it a blob. If you want to put any words and any other widgets into this group, you click the widget or the word, and then you right click into the group, and there's add to group, and then it'll add it to that rectangle. The next part, let's look into how you relate objects in Rhino into Grasshopper. So let's first in Rhino just make a point. So go back to Rhino, type in point, or use the thing on the side. Let's drag this here. Just grab a point and put it anywhere you want in Rhino. And then if you go to Grasshopper, double click and type in point as well. It's that first one with the little X value. And you see it's just a very simple widget, and right now it's orange, which means there's an error with it. So if you go over to this little thought bubble, it says floating parameter failed to collect data. So it means it has nothing with it right now. So right now it's not outputting anything, and there's a small error with it. So if you make this panel, and it'll come out with no data at all. If you wanted to relate it to this point in Rhino, you right click point. Yeah. And then right down here there's set one point.
Set one point.
Yeah.
Oh, so my Grasshopper closed. Mine too.
No, it's just
Oh, it's
click the point in Rhino now.
Okay.
Do you want to set it to?
And then select the point in Rhino,
Oh, that came back.
and it'll come back.
All that work.
Yeah, if you don't have them half and half, it'll go to the Rhino.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like when you say set one point, it goes to the Rhino screen and asks you to choose a point, and that's why it turns off sometimes. If you don't have it split screen, then it's gonna do that.
Was it set one point? Is that
Yeah,
what-
yeah. So now you see that in Rhino, there's this little red X where the point was. If you click on the point in Grasshopper, it turns green. So anything you click in Grasshopper, if you click a widget, that thing in Rhino will turn green. So like, remember our first point we made over here? This turns green. You click this one turns green. It's a good way of keeping track of what's being made in Rhino. And you can see that once we put that in, it's turned white, and it has a reference point in there.
So just to like recap that, the first script was we made a point in Grasshopper and set its coordinates, and then it previewed it in Rhino, but there's no point to actually click in Rhino.
Yeah.
The second version was we just made a point in Rhino and linked it to a widget in Grasshopper.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of doing it. One, the first way it gives you controllability with the coordinates of where you want to put it. The second is only you can move it in Rhino, but you can't move it in Grasshopper.
Right. So like if you see it like as moving in Rhino, it's adjusting in Grasshopper. It's like moving that red X, or in this case it would be a green X, to wherever you want it to be. So this is like a good way of like, if you want to control in Rhino, you can do it this way. If you want to control in Grasshopper, you have to write this little bit longer of a script. But there's more advantages to keeping it this way because you can relate these numbers to other things you want to make later on.
So the panel doesn't tell us the coordinate.
Right.
Is there a way that we can see what the coordinate is from Grasshopper? Or is that
Not that I can think off the top of my head. Oh, there's, yes there is. You can go deconstruct,
Oh yeah.
deconstruct point, or deconstruct.
Yeah. Deconstructing
Yeah.
X, Y, Z.
And then I guess instead of
And then you plug the point into that widget. Widgets are really important sometimes, and if you want to rename them, you go to this black part, you right click, and then you can just type in the name. So we'll call this one point 1.
are you renaming the widget?
So we'll rename the widget for
Oh,
you.
that's what we want. Okay.
Yeah, so that way you can keep track of like what things are sometimes. You can also rename this one, right click, type in point 2. So right now you see in Rhino you've got 2 points. So you've got point 2, point 1, and they highlight in green as you're going. So let's start to make a line between them. So you double click, type in line. It's not the first one, it's the second one. It's the one with the 2 dots at the end. The first one is like just like this point where you like set a line to it, but this one actually makes a line based on endpoints and start points. So double click, type in line, make sure you get the second one up top here.
So anything in black is one that you would have to set. The
Yeah.
other ones are Grasshopper ones.
Yeah, so like the ones that are black with a hexagon are like things you grab from Rhino into Grasshopper, and then the rest are actually like just Grasshopper.
Which are the two lines again?
The second one,
Not the black.
the one with the 2 dots at the end, this one. So your widget should come out like this. It says start point, end point. If ever you look at a widget and you don't know what it's asking for, you can hover over the spot, and it'll usually tell what you want, tell you what it wants. So this one's saying line start point.
You want to do the help thing real quick then? That's a good segue into that. You right click and go help.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Remember we went,
Yeah.
if you right click on the widget and go help, it explains what.
We,
It represents the collection scheme.
So,
Wait,
yeah, sometimes you might be exploring things in Grasshopper, you're not really sure how to build the script, you're just testing widgets. You want to look at what that widget's going to do.
Yeah, so it's a good description of what it wants. But in this case, it's pretty simple. You want the start point and end point. So you got your point 1 here. You drag your wire into the start point here. Point 2, you drag it into the end, and then it makes a line for you between the 2. So you got your line there. If you select it, turns green. And now if you adjust the point, like the first point you had, you just move that number, the line will adjust with it at the same time. So you can begin to see how, like, if you have a longer script and you want to adjust one thing, everything else adjusts with it, it'll keep things a lot more efficient.
But this is where the difference is, where that one point is being changed by a number slider, and the other point is being changed by only in Rhino. So you wouldn't be able to say, I want to move that point over 2 times x. Like, you wouldn't be able to use math. So by creating it in Grasshopper, you can use math and start to build more complicated things.
So the next thing I'll show you guys is how to move something. Or actually, I'll show you how to turn off. Like right now, you got 2 points here. If you don't want it to be shown, you can turn off the preview. So say if I want to turn off this first point, or this point we made, you go to this widget, that's the point, it turns green. You right click the point and you uncheck this preview and it'll turn off in Rhino. So once you have like a lot of things going on and you have like your basic points you don't want anymore, you can turn that off. And it just turns off the preview, it's still there, and if you adjust things, it'll still move.
You already created this one, right?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, go to your point here. You right click it, and you have to right click in the black part.
Okay.
Because if you right click the x coordinate, it'll start doing like things for the x coordinates, and if you right click point, it'll do stuff for the point. But if you want to do something for the widget or like the preview, you have to right click the black part for the widget, and then you turn off the preview, and it'll turn off here in Rhino. But it'll still be there. It just won't show you anymore. And that makes it a little cleaner. If the only thing you're concerned was the line, then you'll have that there. A little nicer to see.
Another way to do that is if you press space,
Yeah.
you get a bunch of different options, and then the one with the blindfold is
Yeah.
to turn it
Disable
off.
preview. So let's go into moving things. So if you double click and type in move, enter, you get a move widget. So this widget doesn't really do anything on its own. You have to type in, so it's asking for geometry. So let's say we want to move our line. We'll plug our line into that geometry. You see it's moved based off of its default settings, but say if you want to move it in the X direction instead of the Z, you actually have to type in which direction you want to do it in. So you double click, you say you move in the X direction, you type in X, you see this thing called unit X. And then you plug that into motion. So now it's moving in the X direction along that red axis. And then it can this unit X takes in a number slider, so you can change how far you want to move it. So let's say I want to move it between 1 and 20, so type in 1 dot dot 20. I've got the number slider that goes 1 to 20. You plug that into the factor, and now you can move that line as much as you want in that X direction. So now if this is the line you're working with now and you don't care about this one anymore, you can go back to this line and then turn the preview off. And so that way you don't have to look at that one anymore, you just see this one that you're moving around. If you want to move in the other direction, you have to put in a negative widget. So you type in negative, you see this widget here. And you take the value, you plug it into the negative one, and then you put the negative one into the factor.
Can you have negative numbers in your number slider?
Maybe. I think you can actually, negative.
I don't think you can in natural numbers though.
You can? Yeah, I guess you can.
Those just 2 different ways to do it.
So you can do it that way too if you want, and have a negative number. And that way you see where the point is. If it's at 0, it's on the point, and then you can move it to the right of it or the left of it. That way. So let's just keep that one, the slider.
Everybody okay with?
No.
So can you plug in unit X, unit Y, unit Z
Yep.
all into motion?
Or
Or do you have to do separate move for each direction?
I do separate moves. I don't think there is a way
Okay,
to
because
do
you
it.
would move it.
Yeah, you just make a new geometry move. Do you know a way of doing that, Jordan, or anything?
I'm just gonna test it.
Because I always make a separate move widget, and that just makes it really
I'm
messy.
sure
but-
there is, but
So if you want to make this line actually show up in Rhino, you have to bake it. So if you right click the widget, there's a little egg for bake, and then this window pops up. You can assign it to whatever layer in Rhino that you have. Like these are all layers in Rhino. So let's say layer 1, and then if you have multiple things you're baking at once, you can group it. And you can ask it nicely to group it,
yes, please.
and then okay. And now in Rhino, that line shows up. And you can move that line. It does not affect Grasshopper anymore. Although, like, they're not linked anymore to each other between Grasshopper and Rhino. It's a separate entity in Rhino now. It's only red because the layer in Rhino is red. I'll just show you like the preview thing. So these little buttons up here show like they control what Rhino previews. So right now we have it on this red one. If you click on that one, yeah. Let's click on this one on the left. It just turns off all the previews in Rhino in case it gets a little too messy and you want to just work in Rhino. You just click that; it'll turn off all the previews. Turn that one back on. To previews back on, just click this red one. If you want Rhino just to show what you've selected, you turn this one on so nothing shows up. But once you select move, that thing will come up. You select point, that X will come up. So that's a way of like if it's getting a little too messy for you. Most of the time, I just keep this one on. I have everything showing, and then I just turn off previews for things I don't need anymore. All right, let's make a rectangle now. So double click and type in rectangle. I think it's the first one. Yeah.
Was it the black one or the orange one?
So
The second one is the.
Cody mentioned that the ones that have a black hexagon is looking for you to draw a rectangle in Rhino and then link it in Grasshopper. Everything else is Grasshopper generated.
Yeah. So you want this little orange one? It should come up with this. Does everybody have this?
Just so you guys know, that black and orange distinction is something that every single tutorial I've done has not covered. That is like mind blowing. It's like, oh my goodness.
I know. I was looking at tutorials yesterday for this stuff too, and I was learning things like basic tutorials of Grasshopper. There's, you learn a lot from like watching people too. Like I was looking at, like if I want to say do something Grasshopper, just look on YouTube how to do this thing, and then you watch somebody work, and you're like, oh, this is the best way to do that. Oh, this is the way to simplify things too. So a lot of the time, if I don't know what I'm doing, most of the time I just Google it, and it'll show me a video, and then I'll like try to combine videos to do what I'm doing, stuff like that too. Or there's also pre-written scripts. If you say you want like a Vernois pattern, I'm sure like there's something online that is already done for you. You just download the script. It'll come with all the widgets, and then you just kind of figure out how it works for yourself, I guess.
Grasshopper has a very good forum
Yeah.
that's very active where you can post questions like even as a student or a professional, and somebody will like help you like 99% of the time, and they'll post scripts that you can like download and like modify and use. So everybody's constantly learning from each other.
Yeah, nobody actually taught me Grasshopper. I just went online and started Googling things. A lot of it is also based on like computer scripting. Has anybody done computer scripting before? Like Java, C++, anything like that?
No.
A lot of it's basically like, it's basically the same thing, it's writing code. So if you're writing code, you're putting variables in your output and you're like relating things
This is
together.
like the nicer version because
Yeah.
it's visual.
It's very
It's the easy way.
Exactly, yeah.
Instead of just reading like a whole paragraph of like something that looks undecipherable,
Yeah.
there's beautiful images to help you.
So within each of these widgets, those lines of code are put in there.
Yeah.
You're just not seeing it.
It's a very simplified way of doing it. Okay, so let's play with this rectangle. So it says it wants a plane, it wants an X size, a Y size, and then this radius means like the fillet edges you want. So we won't touch the radius, but we'll play with these ones. So right now, you can see in Rhino there's this little grid that shows up in the rectangle. is because it's in the, right now it's in the XY plane. So X being this red line, Y being this green line, so it's flat on those XY coordinates. If you wanted to say, like, do the YZ plane, double click in Grasshopper, type in YZ. There's a YZ plane here. Click that and just plug that into plane of rectangle, and now it's oriented this way in the Y direction and in the Z direction upwards.
So by default, it's XY.
Yeah, by default. But we'll work in the XY plane, so we just delete this, and it'll be XY plane. So we'll work at it when it's flat. So let's put in an X size. So double click, let's say between 1 and 20. We'll make a slider 1.20. Plug that in the X. Copy this widget, however you'd like to copy it. And plug that into the Y size. So then once you make it bigger, you can start to see this rectangle show up in your Rhino. So type in box rectangle.
Oh, okay, not that one. Sorry.
It's one.
Box rectangle.
Box rectangle.
See if the widget looks like a little orange box. So it asks for a rectangle for you to put into it and a height, so it's pretty self-explanatory. So copy another number slider for the height of that box. You plug the rectangle into the rectangle, and then you height your slider for the height, and you can adjust this and it'll adjust the height of that box for you. And again, if you still adjust this, it'll adjust that as well.
So now you start to see like a little bit of the power of Grasshopper. You can, with more scripting, you can do this floor plate and change the height of a building and the amount of floors all of number sliders.
Yeah.
Really quickly.
When would you change the length?
What, sorry?
So under the rectangle widget is length, and it's not going to anything. What is that for?
That
Hover over it. What's
Yeah.
that say?
is,
Length of the rectangle curve.
oh yeah, it's like the perimeter. It's like the length of the perimeter. So I don't know if there's anything you can think of that we need to.
There might be another widget that would require a length of the rectangle to.
Yeah. So type in area, and you see this little m squared. And then you plug the rectangle into geometry of that area. You could just hover over area and it'll tell you what the area is, or you can make a panel so it's a little clearer. And plug the area into the panel and it will show you the area of the box. So if it's 17 by 9, it's going to be 153 square meters. And as you're adjusting this, it'll adjust the area for you as well. So I like to rename this panel to like area meter squared.
It's centroid.
So the centroid keeps track of where the center, you see that little X show up? If you click it, it'll keep the center of that geometry for you.
So it could be like X, Y, Z.
It's just like if you want to build something off of like the center of a point, you can use this point now. So it's outputting a point for you, and you can also like say you want to plug this into the line. You guys don't have to do this, but it'll plug in that.
So if you're like massing
Center to the
building
line.
in the car, it needs to-
I find a lot of Grasshopper, you're kind of picturing things in your head. So like Kevin was saying, if you want to find the volume of the extruded faces, so these 4, you think about the perimeter of the rectangle. So this perimeter times the height will give you that. So if you take the length of the perimeter and multiply it by that height you're giving it, and the output is the surface area of the 4 sides of this box. So we'll do a cylinder next. So because we were doing that, we don't want this stuff on anymore. So I grouped all my box stuff. If you select it all, type in, press space, and then there's that blindfold guy up top here. Click that, and then your preview for that box will be all off. So now we can start moving on to working on something else. Group this too. Alright, let's do cylinder. So type in cylinder. So that's asking for a base. The base default is at 0, 0 on the in Rhino grid. And then you put in a radius, let's say between 1 and 20. Plug in that slider. And then make another number slider for the height. So let's say between 1 and 100, 1.100. And then you put that into length. And then you change the length and the height of this radius of the cylinder. So right now, this cylinder is it's like a hollow cylinder. It's got no top and no bottom. So like our Rhino command, if you go and type in cap, like we worked on in our previous tutorials, there is a thing to cap it. You plug that cylinder into the cap, and it makes a solid cylinder for you. And then you can turn off the preview for this cylinder because you don't need it anymore. So if this base is like where you want the base of the cylinder to be, right now, like I said, it's defaulted at 0, 0. If you want to say, let's put this base at our point that we made before, this point here. So we go back to our previous stuff and we go to, let's make it this one. So I'll turn this preview back on. Our point is out there. Let's move it just a little closer. So this green point right here, we want that to be the base of our cylinder, so we take the point from this widget and plug it into the base of our cylinder. And the cylinder pops over to that. The sphere is, let's do a sphere, so it's pretty much the same thing as a cylinder. Just type in sphere. The first one with the orange one. Here's your sphere widget. It's even more simple because all it needs is a base and a radius. So right now it's again defaulted at 0, 0, 0. Make a slider, say 1 to 30, and you can adjust the radius of that sphere.
The number of polygons in a sphere or a circle.
Polygon?
Well, it's made up of a series of polygons, not a round.
In this case, it is a round object. It's a NURB. It's a NURB object. It's when you're working with meshes that it has a bunch of different facets. So if you're working in Rhino, most of the time we're working in NURBs. It's just a solid sphere. So if I bake this, it is one solid sphere. It doesn't have any.
But its appearance is bumpy.
It shouldn't be once you.
On the screen,
just
there's like-
increase the number and it comes out as
Oh. When you bake it, it comes out as a nice round object. It's just previewing it, so it's a little easier for it to process, I guess. Once you bake it, it's a nice round object.
So if I want my sphere, like its
Mhm.
base point, to always be the bottom of it,
The
is
bottom.
there a way to make the base be equal to the radius so that it's always adding it, that like bottom half of the sphere? Does
Yes.
that make sense?
Uh,
I was trying to do like a unit vector. Like,
where do you want? Do you want the bottom of the base?
well,
to
I'm
be
just
like
thinking
on
like
the
I
front?
want the bottom of it to be its base, or the bottom of my sphere to be its sphere instead of the middle. So what do I do?
You would use the base point. So say if you use this point, you would make a move. I'm making this slow.
Sorry, I'm just trying to think of it as
Yep.
I always want the sphere to add its
Yeah.
radius to the base.
So you
So it's not an
Go
actual
move.
point I'm pulling from.
and then Z direction.
Move, okay.
You guys don't yeah. And then you bring your, say you want the base to be this point and you want it to be the bottom of it. You take this point, I think this is how you do it. Let me just bring
And
that up.
factor is the number slider that I use for the radius. No, it's not right.
Yeah, there we go. So I'm taking this point that we have, this right here. I'm moving it upwards the same distance as the radius of the sphere. And then I'm taking that point and using that new point as our base. So now this sphere has a base, like on the bottom, with this point as the bottom of it. Do you?
But if I don't want to involve the cylinder, is this still
Oh, just turn the cylinder off.
Yeah.
okay? But you're pulling the cylinder into the command.
You just,
Under geometry.
the cylinder is over here. It's not related to it at all.
Oh, okay. I saw that line.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's confusing the lines. So this is taking that point. I'm moving it up the same number as the radius of the sphere, and that way you can have the base as the radius, or the base. Of the
So
point.
why do you have the point in it? Like, why do you have to have something in geometry? Is that why you're doing it?
It's basically like if I turn this one off, and then now the sphere is just based on that point only. So if I adjust this, it moves
Just get
there.
rid of the cylinder, so it's confusing.
Sorry, yeah.
That's what I'm curious.
So group this guy. Let's turn everything off. So select everything. Spacebar, blindfold. So everything's off and everything's clean again. Okay, so let's make a new point. So construct point. So this guy here, construct point. Let's give it number slider from 0 to 10. We'll make 3 of these guys so that we can adjust the point individually. So now the point shows up on here. Let's make another rectangle first. Rectangle. Give it some sliders, so 0 to 10. Let's make it 7 by 7, something like that. So now I've got my point, and I've got my rectangle. Double click and type in array, and then use the rectangular array.
Box array.
Just type in array and use a rectangular
Or
array.
rectangular array.
So now it's asking for geometry, cell, which is your rectangular cell, and then your count of how many you want. So first thing you do is plug in your point into geometry, because you want to array your point. You put rectangle into cell, and so you see it's already defaulted to a certain number. What it does is it copies that point. Let's make the sliders here first. Say 1 to 20. Make 2 of them. Plug that into the X and Y count. Alright, so what this is doing is it's arraying this point. It takes this point into geometry. It'll copy that point this many times. So right now it's only 1. So if you do in the X direction, you see that the point starts copying over 6 times. And it's copying it over by the length of that rectangle you've given in the beginning. So if you adjust the X direction of this rectangle, it adjusts how far those points move. So let's just turn this rectangle off. And now this slider adjusts how far in the X. If you want to change this to, say, a 6 by 6 grid for this rectangular array, you can adjust the distance between them and the X and the Y, however you like. So if you look at what's being output by this array thing, you see this wire is a lot thicker than the other ones. It means it's outputting a list. It's not just one item, it's outputting a bunch of things. So if you put a panel to it, it's outputting 36 different points. And one thing to keep in mind in Grasshopper, which is always very confusing, is it always starts with the number 0. So if you have 36 items, it'll have 35, but because it starts with the number 0, there's your 36th item. That's something that when you're doing, we'll get into list management another time, but when you think about lists, like it always has to be one less than what you think it is, which is confusing, but this is something to keep in mind. Alright, so this diagram explains how the wires work. If you're putting in, like, if things are turning out orange, it means there's no data coming in, or like if there's an error. So keep that in mind, and then always try to figure out how to give these things some values. If there's a single curve going in, there's only one thing going into it. So for example, like, or 1 point or single point goes in, it's got a nice black curve like this. For PC, it's got this double line, but for Mac, I think it's just a thicker line. If there's a thicker line that shows up, it means there's a list of things that are coming in. So like, for example, what's coming out of this array is a list of points. There's 36 points or whatever number you set it to be. And then later on, there's like multiple lists coming out. This is what the dotted thing comes up. That's something for later on though. But just keep that in mind, that if you have fancy wires on, which is if you go to go back to Grasshopper and then go to view. No, display. There's draw fancy wires. So right now you can see like this one coming out with all these numbers is a thick line. If you turn the fancy wires off, it just goes back to normal wire. But I don't see any reasons why you wouldn't want that on, because it helps you out to show you what's coming out of this widget. So if we have all these points and say we want to make a sphere at every one of these points, so grab our sphere widget, bring it over here, you plug geometry into the base of these points. The things coming out of this is all the points, and you want these points to be the base of all these spheres.
Jeez. Sorry, that was Manasc.
You can make all those points the base of a sphere, and now you've got 36 spheres coming out of it.
Yeah.
And now as you adjust the radius of this, it'll adjust the radius of all the spheres at once. So you might want to adjust your number slider for the radius. So just like double click it and change it from like 0 to 1 instead of 1 to 30. Or 1 to 2 and have it as decimal points. And that way you can adjust it nicer. I've got one more little thing to do, and then that should be it for today. So I'll group this and I'll turn this off. Alright. I want you guys to go in Rhino and then make 2 random curves that are kind of parallel to each other. So 1 and then. Okay, go to Grasshopper, double click, and type in divide curve.
Divide?
Yeah, divide curve. It should be this.
Grasshopper?
Yeah, back to Grasshopper. So you can do this in Rhino, but like this is the thing that you can also do in Grasshopper. A lot of the commands are similar. That's why it's good to know Rhino pretty well first, so that they try to think in Rhino terms and how to do it in Grasshopper. Divide curve. This guy here. Alright, and then make 2 of them. So again, right now they're orange because there's nothing going into them, they have nothing coming out of it. There's 2 ways of doing this now. I want to associate these curves to this divide curve. You can either right click here and set a curve, or what I prefer doing is typing in curve and getting that hexagon widget so I can relate it to the Rhino object. Make 2 of them. Go to curve, right click, set one curve. Yeah, and then just select one of them in Rhino. And then do the same thing with the second one, set one curve, and then choose the other curve. So now you've brought those curves into Grasshopper. So this is the one selected on the right, this one is the left one. And then bring those curves into divide curve. And then make a number slider, say from 1 to 100. And then plug that into the count.
It turned green, so now it's been associated.
Both plug the same widget into both counts, so that there's an equal number of points. So now the next thing to do is to draw a line between all the points. So type in line. You use the second one with the 2 dots again, not the hexagon one. So just to explain how this is going to work, I'll show a panel. Right now, what it's doing right now is taking this curve that you've put into it and dividing it into, in this case, 28 different points, or 29 because it starts at 0. If you look at what's coming out of it, there is, come on, 29 points. So it says 28, but you also have to add the 0 one. So there's 29 points coming out of it. And there's 29 points coming out of this one as well. And so in order, if we put in the points to start, like the start point of a line and the end point of the line, it'll take the 0 point from this widget and the 0 point from this widget and connect it. And it'll connect the 1 to the 1 and the 2 to the 2. So if you plug in
41.
this point into this point,
If you turn on your point list, it might
Which
show
one?
better, because then it numbers it. If you type in point list, it'll number it, and then it might show.
okay, maybe I'll do that. So,
But now we're gonna draw a line between these points, so it's asking for
And then
start
you can,
point,
where does it show it?
which is
it's just really small, so under size, turn, like make it bigger with the number slider.
Oh, okay.
And then it'll, like,
You make them giant?
yeah, like something like this. So like, it'll show you,
Smart. So Yang is saying this widget called point list. If you plug your points into it and then you change the size of these numbers, it'll number out all the points for you. So this doesn't actually bake in anything. It's just a very easy way to see. Actually, you might be able to bake it, but it's a very easy way to see what point is what. So this giant list of points, point 0 is this first point on the line here. And then point 1 is there, point 2 is there. And we plug this in as well. Oops.
you should probably make a different point list, because it'll
Oh yeah, that's right.
continue the numbers.
Okay. So the point list, if you plug your points into it and then you change the size of the numbers, it'll show you what points are where. And when you're making this line together, it'll connect the numbers together. So like it'll connect the zeros together, the ones together, the twos together. And it goes in order of your list that you're doing. This will segue into our probably next session where we talk about list management. But if you take this and now you can adjust the number of counts that you're dividing it by, and it'll adjust all the curves with it, all the lines between them. So it's getting a little heavy to put these on.
Maybe delete your list or your panel.
There we go. And then if you want all these lines, you go to bake it, and put it on the number 2 layer, yes please group, and you go to Rhino. All these lines have now been baked out for you. So something else I can show you guys is you see how this list goes from 0 to 30 here? And it's connecting the 0 to the 0 across from it. If you want to reverse it, connect this one to the end point here and then this one to this one. All you have to do is go to this point here. And this list of points coming out right now, like the zeros up here with the 3 point whatever for the list, if you go right click the point area and reverse the list, it'll reverse it also that it connects like reverse order, and then that 3.8 whatever goes up to the number 30. So now that everything is connecting to the opposite side.
So just reverse the list.
So that's the basic way of how to like control your lists.
Right click on the rows, on the points. And just
think
reverse
something
this.
important to remember is that
Really, so-
Grasshopper always starts at 0, like
Yeah.
0 is a number.
Is it like,
I didn't hear. But yeah, reminded me then.
yeah, it makes it so complicated
It
sometimes. Like, if you want
confuses
30
the-
things, you have to put 29.
Yeah, it confuses me all the time.
And you have to like subtract a certain thing if
See
things
what
are.
those.
Yeah, it's always when you're dividing and it doesn't work out and you're like, why?
Why?
Why can't I divide
Because you have
by
one
8?
extra.
Yeah,
Right, the zero.
yeah.
So reverse, just reverse the one.
Right.
One.
It's quite beautiful.
So there's different ways you can adjust this thing. If you want to adjust the number side of the count, you can get thicker line or more lines. You can also still move this curve in Rhino, and it'll adjust to it. If you type in points on like we were doing before, and you adjust this curve. Nope, that's the wrong point. It'll still adjust everything in there with it.
We need to all